everybody should know the value of your product.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the thoughtful relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today is the fourth episode of our season of Pricing Executives. And we're going to do 5 to 10 episodes in a row to learn how pricing executives think. And today, our guest executive is Wendy Johnson. Here are 3 things you want to know about Wendy before we start. She started out as an M&A consultant at Accenture. God, that had to be a fun job. After she got her MBA, she went to IBM, another big corporation, as a pricing and investment specialist. She was at CA Technologies for 8 years, where she was VP of Global Pricing and is now an executive at FIS. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
This is going to be so much fun. So how did you get into pricing?
So actually, it wasn't, I fell into pricing. I like to tell people that.
Everybody does.
When I was recruited to work for IBM, I was recruited into their finance organization, and I was placed in pricing. I was new to pricing as a function and learned everything I know about pricing there.
Wow. So most of us, I think, when we're first exposed to pricing, it's because we get involved in some big project, we had some big impact, and we say, oh, that's impressive. Is that the story that happened to you as well?
No, and actually, IBM had a huge pricing organization. I know it's somewhat contracted now, but it was very developed, very much a very mature pricing organization within finance. And pricing was very influential to the business there. There was a lot of structure around the organization in terms of processes, compliance, tools that we use. So there wasn't a lot to do outside of that structure. So there wasn't any specific project that I worked on or that existed that drove the organization to, have any specific focus on pricing or the work that I was doing. I was just incorporated into the organization, and it's much like you would see a marketing organization or a product management organization today. There was a lot of structure around it.
Nice. So why did you stay in pricing? Why are you still there?
It was very interesting. I like the fact that pricing touched all areas of the business. It's very much a matrix function. In order to do our jobs right, we have to be engaged with all of the different functional areas, and you really just learn how the business runs in pricing in a way that you really don't do in other areas of the business.
That is so true in every company. Pricing touches so many different departments. Okay, so now you've made it up into the executive ranks, the highest tiers of pricing you can get to. What were your special skills? How did you do that?
I think it is, well, when I moved to CA Technologies, I think it was just a very strategic move for me because I came, as I mentioned, from IBM, where they had so much structure and so much rigor around the pricing function, to a company that did not have a pricing function at all. So I was able to add value very quickly and be able to basically implement a lot of things very quickly and take advantage of a lot of low-hanging fruit and be very impactful to the business. I had great leaders there. My boss, Denise Elias, who recruited me, as well as the CFO, who actually came from IBM, who was very engaged in pricing and very much valued the work that I was doing. So that helped as well. And they were very much champions for me. And that's much needed in any type of role that you need people who are very much invested in your career and will champion your work and help me progress up through the ranks.
Nice. So believe it or not, the next question I was going to ask you is, do you have mentors? And so what did they do for you? I assume those were your mentors and maybe you had others.
Yes.
What did they do? How did they help you?
They really just valued my work, and they supported the work that I was doing. Um, they provided very critical and honest feedback, and they left the door open. They didn't limit me in any way in terms of how I wanted to impact the business. Denise was very smart. She was definitely a working manager herself. And a lot of my management, the things I learned about managing people, I've adopted from her, and, equally good managers that I've had throughout my career. But she was always a collaborator with me. And then that helped as well, so that you don't get stuck where you are. You're always leveling up to in terms of your work, and just that kind of visibility helps a lot. Mhm.
Do you think of yourself as a quantitative, logical person or more of a touchy-feely, managerial person? And you could probably tell which I am just from that question.
I'm definitely more quantitative, but very much conscious of that, and that awareness. Whatever you are, you just need to be aware of it and make sure that you have balance on your team, right? And so the work that I do is very data driven. Of course, there's a very large subjective piece that comes into pricing as well, because especially in enterprise pricing and the B2B space where I've done most of my work, there isn't always perfect data, right? There's not a lot of data that you can do some of the analysis that you learn in business school and employ a lot of those tools. You're not able to do that all the time. So there's a very large subjective piece as well that needs to come into play.
Yeah. So the reason I asked the question is because I know that my best mentors taught me more about management than about pricing. And so I was guessing, since you said that, it's like, oh, I'll bet she's more logical too, more data
Yeah.
driven. So nice. So you have a team, or you've always had teams of people working for you, or often. Tell me, what are the characteristics of the best pricing people on your teams?
Really, the characteristic, I mean, there's a lot that you need to have, because there's no getting around knowing how to analyze data and build models for pricing. So everybody needs to know how to do that, and be able to read the reports and be able to assess that data. I think key is knowing how to build relationships. Pricing is also typically, anytime you're making a pricing decision, there's a lot of emotion behind it, whether it's from the product owners or the salespeople. There's conflict across those different groups. And you have to be able to manage those discussions and not be emotional and come out with an answer that maybe not everybody likes, but everybody can accept, right? And everybody can support and respect. The other thing is, we deal with a lot of data and we're getting a lot of information in, and it's really about mining through all of the information you're getting, and having the skill to make decisions from it. Like, what is that data telling you? What should you be looking for? When you hit a roadblock, what are you going to do next? What are you going to look at next? So that's a very important skill as well.
Yeah. So I love the data driven ones because they feel so natural to me or feel comfortable to me.
Right.
The one that's really hard, let me ask you, if I have to go convince, or you have to, or one of your people has to go convince sales and the product development team that this is the right price. Sales wants a lower price. The product team wants a higher price, and you're in the middle someplace. How do they do that? What are the skills? What are the things they can do to make that happen?
Usually, I mean, there's a couple of things you could look at. The best is if you have the data that just spits out the right answer for you, right? Because nobody can argue with that. But that generally never happens. A lot of times we're looking at past performance, right? Look what happened when we had a similar decision to make, either in your group or had a similar decision to make in some other area. And let's look at the results of that. or if you've been doing things one way all along and not getting the results that you want, it's probably likely that the best decision is to change and try a new direction. But there's so many things that impact pricing. A lot of times when you have most of the work that's thrown our way where people want some kind of pricing analysis, the problem is usually not pricing. People usually think it's pricing because it's the easiest thing to point to, right? This price is probably too high. Oftentimes, the direction we give is usually pointing to something else, pointing to some other piece of that product or the go-to-market strategy outside of pricing.
I have to say one of my favorite sayings is your pricing problem is probably not your price, it's your value.
Exactly. So, and it works out well because there's so many levers that you can pull. If you can't get agreement on a change of price, you might just have to pull another level to balance out the solution.
Yeah. So one of the things my mentor taught me, which is probably the single most valuable thing I ever learned, was instead of trying to convince people of what I was trying to get accomplished, I was always spending time listening to different people.
Yes.
I wanted to know what their goals were, what their opinions were. And eventually if I was the one who had to make the decision, eventually the decision I made at least was made listening to and paying attention to everybody else that mattered.
No, I agree. And people appreciate that. Everybody appreciates that. Everybody wants to feel heard, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully you're in a situation where everybody wants to do the right thing, right? For the business.
Yep, absolutely. So I love this concept. I often think of this concept called pushing walls. And I think of pushing walls as I'm about to go knock down a big constraint. When you joined CA, they had no walls, right? You just got to go build whatever the heck you wanted or whatever you thought was appropriate. But you could easily imagine at IBM, if you wanted to change something, now you got to push a big wall.
Oh, yeah, it was almost impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now think about your people for a second. Would you want your people, how much time, how much energy should they spend pushing walls versus doing the job we've asked them to do? Does that make sense, the question?
No, it's a good question. I think it's probably trying to figure out how to be influential. The most valuable use of your time is probably figuring out how to be the most influential within the constraints that you have, and trying to make incremental change on those and pushing out those walls at the same time, right? Because pushing walls, believing that you have the right answer and I've tried to do that in my past, even at CA, is just it's just too hard, and you waste a lot of time. You waste a lot of time doing that. Yeah. The only way I've seen that been successful is when you have a directive coming from the top, right? But trying to do that kind of laborious work from the bottom up is nearly impossible, and you just get frustrated.
It is very hard, there's no doubt. And so it's got to be well worth it if you're going to spend your time and energy doing it.
Exactly.
And I think the other
There's
thing—
so much room to be influential. I mean, I talk about IBM and how much structure they have. There's still relationships to build. There's still discussions to have, and you can do that in any environment, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a matter of changing processes. And what I often try to coach people to do is recognize what the constraints are, and then you get to make a decision. Am I going to go try to change that or not?
Right.
And
right.
it's
Right.
easier
And
not
who are
to
you going
change
to
it.
take with you? And who are you taking with you? Who are you?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Who's pushing beside me?
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so now you're looking across your huge team of pricing people that are working for you. Which one are you going to go promote? What are the characteristics of that person?
Yeah. And that's tough because I mentioned before that I usually take a collaborative approach with working with my team. So there's usually a couple of people who can replace me if I leave. I'm very comfortable that, I have people on my team that can step right in and not miss a beat. So who do you choose, right? Who do
Mhm.
you choose to replace you? It's a tough decision, and it's usually looking forward in terms of what's next on the docket, and who you think would be better aligned to that particular project. Um, it's better when you've developed trust across your team, which I think um, I do well. I hope they would say that, so that there's not animosity or any bad feelings when that decision is made, and everybody knows that, their time is coming, whether in that particular role or somewhere else. Mhm.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so we're going to start wrapping this up, but I got to ask the final question that I always ask. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Um, you know, I would say, and you caught me off guard with that one, but I would say the pricing advice that I would give for our listeners in any company is that everybody should know the value of your product. Because I find that we can do the best work in terms of pricing and setting a price um, that best aligns with your strategy. But the people who have to execute it determines the success of that price. Can your sales rep execute that price in the market? And I think that's where everybody, a lot of times our strategies fall short. Do your sales rep believe in the value of what you're trying to sell? Do they understand it? Do they understand it from the customer's perspective? And not just sales. And you can tell how good your sales team is if you ask somebody else in the company, like an administrative assistant or somebody in operations, what your company sells and what the value is, and if they can answer that. Like, do you have champions for what you do as a company, and do they understand the value?
You have no idea how much I love that answer. That was so awesome. Now, how much time do you think your pricing team spends helping people understand what value means?
We actually take a very prescriptive approach to that. Like, we actually want to spend a specific percentage of our time doing that work versus the other analytical work that we do. So we're very much very aware of that, and have tackled that through working with our customer success teams, our sales teams. We develop a lot of collateral around it so people can access it on their own time through self-service tools. And we put a lot of focus on that because we understand the importance. And we understand, like, we even look into the psychology. One of the things that we say to ourselves all the time is that it takes individuals 7 times hearing something
Yes.
before they really know it, or before they actually listen to it or understand it or are able to repeat it. And that's where we want to get everybody, that they're able to repeat it and they really believe the things that we put down on paper.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
Absolutely love that. Wendy, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Oh, thank you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Wendy Johnson, or on social media at WKJ Today um, on both Instagram and I'm sorry.
And
I hope you
something
didn't
else.
edit that out.
That's okay. LinkedIn will be fine.
Yes.
They'll love you on LinkedIn. They'll love you
Yes.
on.
Mhm.
It's just been so fantastic talking to you. We so rarely find lady executives, let alone ladies who are also people of color. So I just love the fact that you are with us today.
Oh, thank you.
Episode 84, all done. Listeners, would you please leave us a review? As always, I'm going to read a review that we got recently. This one comes from Chasil on iTunes. If you want to know how to do pricing better and be more effective at using pricing to grow your revenue and profit, this podcast is the place to go. Excellent. Thank you, Chasil. Don't forget to join our free community at championsofvalue.com. That's where you'll find all of the free content I put out: memes, blogs, videos, podcasts. And as always, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.